Okay, thank you all for being here. We are excited to share what's going on in Silicon Valley and in startup land, with some entrepreneurs and some other EdTech perspectives. So I'm just going to dive right in. I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves for about 30 seconds, share with the audience what they do. I'm going to kick that off and we'll go around the corner. So I'm Torrey Patterson. I'm the founder, managing partner of Owl Ventures, which is a Silicon Valley-based venture capital fund. We invest in Series A and Series B rounds. What that means is that we find startups that have raised a few $1 million typically and help scale them. So we write, $5 to $15 million checks to scale what we think are the best of the best education technology companies. We have a very laser focus on companies that have the ability to show quantifiable student improvement, however measured. We've invested in Newzella, Raise.me, LearnZillion, Dreambox, Panorama, Quizlet, Always Be Learning, Mastery Connect, Presence Learning, EdSurge, Revolution Foods, and 10 Marks. So we've been very active over the last 8 years. So that's me. I'm going to be your host today, and then we'll go around the room.
Hi, my name is Dan Donahue. I'm a Vice President of Strategic Initiatives of BrainPop. BrainPop produces digital educational content for students in K12. When I say digital, we produce animations and games, things to pass on knowledge, but also to get them thinking critically about their world and the world around them. Prior to working at BrainPop, I was with Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit behind Sesame Street, creating Sesame educational initiatives in parts of Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. I guess one thing that sort of ties my experience together is a belief in engaging media. If the media is not engaging, you're not going to reach the kids.
My name is Jeremy. I'm the founder of Make School. We're a computer science and software engineering school based in San Francisco. And we run summer programs targeted at high school and university students in a number of cities around the United States and internationally, SF, New York, LA, and then Taipei, Singapore, Tokyo, and so on. The curriculum for that program is actually used by universities like MIT and Carnegie Mellon to power their mobile development courses. And then we also provide a high school computer science curriculum to about 100 high schools starting this September in the United States. And we run a 2-year program that is an alternative to university. Students can go straight out of high school, forego the traditional path, scares the parents, but gets them jobs. And Google hired a student out of that program just a couple weeks ago. So that's Make School.
Noelle.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Noelle Milholt. I'm co-founder and COO of Speakaboos. Speakaboos is a mobile education company focused on reading motivation for young kids. Our goal is to turn screen time into reading time and make reading every child's first choice. And we do that through a multi-platform product that features interactive stories for kids ages 2 through 8 years old. We reach both schools as well as consumers and homes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andreas Karlberg. I am the CEO of a company called Pamoja Education based in Oxford. We are the exclusive online course provider for the International Baccalaureate. So we have students studying the diploma program with us worldwide. We're in over 500 schools today and growing quite quickly, I'm happy to say. I have a background before I joined Pamoja. I ran the European and Middle Eastern markets for one of the world's largest online English learning platform with a company called EF. And before that, I spent some time in venture capital, actually. Tried it out.
Venture capitalists can do anything. It's good to know. I'm Matthew Greenfield. I am managing partner of another venture fund, Rethink Education. Similar to Torrey's, but different in the sense that we do not only K-12, but also higher education and continuing and workforce education. Typically A and B rounds, although occasionally, on an opportunistic basis, a later stage company. And we have a strong social impact commitment with our core values being that we want to help the most vulnerable populations globally, including those who are poor, those who are not native speakers of the language of the nation where they reside, those who are cognitively or physically different, to gain full enfranchisement in the educational system. And we also want to change the education system for everyone else too. We feel as if the education system today is often wounding and impersonal, and it needs to be more responsive to the needs of individual students and also to the needs of employers.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Matt. All right, we're going to jump right in and hopefully get a lively discussion going. So Daniel and Noel, I want to ask you guys, what makes a great EdTech product? And then we're going to hear from the VC and see if he agrees.
Should I start? It's a good question. I think, first off, in order to make an EdTech product, you really need to listen to whoever your constituent is. And so we listen to teachers. When we created BrainPop, we have a lot of former teachers on our staff, listening to them. What are their pain points? What are they trying to alleviate? And creating a product to meet those needs. But as I said, also, we're also trying to reach students with educational content. So it can't just be directed at the teacher. It needs to be engaging for students as well. So if you look at our animation, there's an element of it that's very basic. It's very 2D. It looks like something that an 8th grader, or a very smart 8th grader, would create. And that's important because students look at it and they can identify with it. It's not coming from a high place.
It's very similar to Speakaboos. We're focused on putting the kids first, and so this idea of intrinsic motivation, making sure that we design our product so that kids naturally are engaged by it. Learning happens best when kids are having fun. So what we do in Speakaboos is we test all of our content with kids, very robust formative research process that we bring into the process, whereby we test each and every interaction, each and every story for high interest. That way we know that kids are really engaged in the content before it's even released. I'd say one other thing is just tools that foster independent learning, that students can use on their own, that a teacher does not necessarily need to be by their side or a parent by their side. Teachers have many challenges, one of which is addressing students with very different needs and reading levels in our case, so we make sure that it's a student-directed product and that we have scaffolds for different reading levels.
Matt, what do you look for when you're looking at?
Well, I think you gave a great description of the most important thing, which is empathy. It seems funny to talk about empathy as a crucial business skill, but it is. Most corporations and most nonprofits fail to really listen to their constituents. The other thing that is important that I think a lot of EdTech companies get wrong is research. And not just startups, but companies like Pearson, which pay lip service to efficacy. But then when you talk to groups of them, you discover that many of them have never heard of John Hattie. And in fact, they're not looking at the research on what works before they design their products. You can't just assess the efficacy of them afterwards. You have to look at this immense body of knowledge on what does and does not work before you start building your products.
I love that response, thank you. So one of the things that wasn't mentioned was business model, right? So, all of this is wasted effort unless we can get these companies big enough and successful enough to be independently viable. Everyone around this room is doing that incredibly well. How do each of you think about the importance of scaling? Do you have any unique strategies that you're particularly proud of? Why don't we start with Make School?
So Make School is a bit of a challenge, especially when you talk to folks like you, because unlike folks like them, we run physical courses. And so there's this ever-present question from a scaling perspective of how do you actually scale something that seems, it'd be so easy to just, let's put it all online and then people can just do it themselves and it'd get really big really fast. And instead you're stubbornly saying, no, we have to open physically in new locations time and time again. But the flip side of that is that seems like a really hard thing to do. So few people try to do it. And so if you believe that it can lead to better results, which we do, that in-person experience, it turns out that not a lot of people this day and age and this wave of entrepreneurship are up for flying out to Dubai to figure out and visit tomorrow 3 different spaces to figure out where you're going to open your Dubai location. So for us, scale turns out to be a challenge of process. It's about repeating or distilling lessons learned and then repeating what has worked in one place, our San Francisco flagship location, how can you replicate what happened there for 8 weeks intensively in Hong Kong? And what are the processes you would use to do so? And then I think from successful high quality replication of the same thing, the rest follows because student interest builds as the outcomes are shown. So it's a really interesting question, and the other part, of course, that these folks can certainly speak to is that technology still plays a big part in getting students eyeballs on your program. We offer a lot of free courses online to get students funneling into our in-person courses and inside the classroom. Instructor time is incredibly precious, and the educators in the room probably know and are frustrated by the fact they spend so much time not actually teaching, but grading or scheduling or reviewing or coordinating. And the more we can automate that, the more we can scale a physical experience with great efficiency.
Yeah, and coming back, completely agree. Coming back to just pure customer acquisition strategy. Andreas, do you want to talk about that a little bit? How do you guys do it, and anything unique you're doing?
Sure. I don't know if it's that unique. I mean, I come from a background where it was pure B2C, selling as many English courses as you possibly could around the world. It's pure online. What we do now is that we're working exclusively with the IB world schools, the international baccalaureate schools around the world. So we are in constant contact with these schools, the principals and the teachers. And in order for us to grow, we need to have a fantastic user experience with great learning outcomes. And the only way to do that, as someone just said, is to be very close to the schools, understand their needs, and work. When we build our platform and our courses, I mean, we've built 22 courses so far, and they're all 2-year long. It's very, a lot of content. So to stay very close to the students and the teachers when we do that in the research is vital.
How about some of the direct-to-consumer stuff? So how are you leveraging traditional internet marketing, or what's?
Yes, well, I just came from our first TV commercial shoot. So we're going to be launching Speakaboost to consumers via a large paid media spend on TV. But of course, we reach schools, and we have a lot of teachers using us as well. So one of the strategies we're using to kind of get that 1 + 1 = 3 equation is to have teachers be our evangelists. And so we're launching features like reporting that teachers are then sharing with parents, so that parents can know what their child is reading in the school, what they're interested in, and really unlocking that information for teachers to share with parents, and then hopefully parents adopt it. There's actually a school here, the Mayor School, where parents have purchased Speakaboos for their use in the classroom, which is a model we don't see very often in the States, giving funding challenges. But that whole school-to-home connection is something that is definitely part of our acquisition strategy.
You want to hit on that at all?
Well, as I started earlier, it's about building a product for your demographic, for teachers. One of the things that I think made us successful is, one, listening to teachers, but then creating pricing models and ways for teachers to buy it. So we make it very easy to buy. So if you're a teacher and want to buy it for your classroom, there's a subscription level. If you want to buy it for a school, there's a subscription level, and district and state and nation. I think that's very important as well, being flexible in how you price your products.
That brings me to the next question. I think we're in sort of business model evolution phase, and you guys have managed to punch through in what I'd call a very early stage of this EdTech market. Where are we in that market? And what I mean by that is, are we still in the very early adopter phase? Are we seeing bigger districts, more sophisticated, kind of traditional buyers starting to make big moves? I mean, Matt, let's start with you. What are you seeing across your portfolio? And then let's go around the room.
Setting aside my portfolio, I have a little theory that just the way an author who is respected enough no longer gets described as a science fiction author, but just as an author, that there are certain big EdTech successes that have just gotten promoted out of the category. I would point to, for example, Facebook, which would have met my firm's investment criteria back in 2006 or 7 even. I would point to Yahoo, which was originally a set of resources for graduate students. Wikipedia, a nonprofit, still has an education mission. I think Google's mission of organizing the world's knowledge is fundamentally an education mission as well. And in some ways, Google is modeled more closely on Stanford University than it is on any other large corporation. So in that sense, there's some maturity to the market already. The place where there isn't maturity, the place where you and I both meet a lot of skepticism and pushback is K12, and particularly companies that sell to K12 school districts. There is a lot more willingness on the part of venture capitalists to invest in companies that use a viral freemium model, even if it's directed to teachers. There are a number of companies in that, with that model that have attracted large amounts of financing. But almost everyone, other than the two of us right here in this room, plus Chantel Paulson, who is elsewhere at this conference, everyone else hates selling to K-12 school districts. They're convinced that school districts are terrible customers. In fact, the numbers do not bear that out. The numbers are good. Much better than for most publicly traded software as a service businesses that sell subscriptions to corporations. But nobody is familiar with those metrics because there haven't been a lot of IPOs. I think that that is one thing we need to jumpstart investment in this sector by people who are non-specialists.
Yeah.
At which point it will become a lot less fun.
Yeah, don't let the secret out, man. Come on. Andreas, where do you think you're at? I mean, it sounds like you're selling to thousands of schools at this point. How are you having? Are you feeling like you're past that tipping point of having to describe why moving online is better or more effective or more cost effective? Yeah.
You'd think, but no. We still have to, we engage a lot with the parents of the students actually in explaining what this actually is. Because one of the things that is different from doing what we do is just the last 2 years before university versus selling what I sold before, which is in an English course, is that it's high stakes for the students. They need to get into the right university. So the parents would really want to know that this actually works. And I have had conversations, in the last couple of months where parents come to me and say, well, aren't the students just all alone in cyberspace when they do anything online? And that is something we constantly have to work on and explain, that we actually many times know more than a traditional school setting would know about the students because we monitor and follow everything they do. But to answer your question, no, absolutely, we still have to work on that. It's not about the quality of the psychology course. It's about, does it work online or not?
It's the medium. Yeah. One concept that I think a lot of people perceive to be at odds is entertaining, engaging versus educational and high efficacy. You would take issue with that, certainly. Well, why don't you hit on that? The three of you will have good perspective on that.
Yeah, sure. I don't think something has to be either educational or engaging. You can do both. Again, Sesame Workshop has 40 years of research that shows that watching Sesame Street on television boosts literacy scores and numeracy scores. My daughter, for instance, she there's a big debate sometimes about are kids learning from the internet or are they learning from apps? And anyone who has a child, they'll probably have seen their kid go on YouTube and learn something. My daughter learned how to knit at 10 years old watching YouTube videos. She learned how to train our puppy watching YouTube videos, which was nice, so I didn't have to do that. So it's not whether kids are learning something from the internet or not. They are. As somebody in EdTech and in educational media, my job now is to how do I make something that's engaging enough so that I'm challenging them to learn something that maybe it's not their first choice to learn, but that it's going to add to their academic credentials.
You must wrestle with this too. How do you make computer science fun?
Right. We have found that when students are empowered to work on their own idea, then they actually overinvest in learning because they don't realize they're learning. They're doing it to make their idea a reality. So we try to spend a lot of time on making sure that they land in some sort of app idea, because we do most of our summer programs are app focused, that they're really excited to bring into the world, or a game idea, and then that kind of carries them the rest of the way. But I was thinking about something that you were saying in regards to selling to school districts and then the maturity of EdTech. And it strikes me that we're at the stage where there seems to be a lot of truisms that aren't true. So I'll hear people say things like, oh, I hear that selling to school districts is really hard. And they never consider it. And they don't actually go look to find out. It's just too early to actually have the access to the correct information. Another one is General Assembly expanded internationally quite aggressively, and word has gotten around that that was a very challenging exercise for them. And so I've heard now for the past couple of years, like, oh, going international with your physical school business, that's really hard. And I'm finding after, I was in about 6 different cities in Asia in the last 8 days leading up to coming to Dubai, and it doesn't seem to be true, and I can see a bunch of counterexamples, but it's become this truism that isn't true. I think that's a sign of EdTech still being in its infancy, and a lack of sophistication around the industry, and even folks who are buying EdTech products don't always yet know what to do with them. When I was in high school, my high school bought a ton of blackboards that were these smart boards, and then they proceeded, it was like $10,000 per classroom, and then they were unused. Literally unused for the rest of my high school career. And then a couple years later, my middle school did the same thing. I was no longer there. And so there's this mismatch of there's an excitement on the concept, but people don't know what to actually do with the concept. People have incorrect views or muddled views on where it's going to go. And I think that folks like you who bring a very well-managed solution that doesn't necessarily rely on the sophistication of the school's correct implementation are really a step in the right direction. And over time, I think folks will start understanding the types of things that work. But in the early days, what you're doing is really what I think the successful ventures will look like.
Here. Let me ask a controversial question given the international audience. Which region of the world outside of the US do you like selling to the best? Where's the best opportunity? Where's the most receptive audience? Where's it working? Can we start with you?
Oh, you're looking at me. That's I want to hide. Our conversation in my eyes has been somewhat focused in the U.S. a little bit and maybe Europe, and it's not. That's not universally around the world. Our growth in the United States primarily happened because we influenced teachers, and teachers spoke to teachers. And we make a big effort to speak directly to teachers, and word of mouth caught on, and they convinced their schools to buy. A lot of countries don't, teachers in a lot of countries don't have that same ability, and so it's a different approach. You have to speak sometimes at the ministry level and convince them of the efficacy of your product. Unfortunately, one of the things we've seen in the past 5 years in a lot of countries is that people are buying devices, but they don't know really what to do with them. I think that's changing, but there was a period of time when you would think that just people were trying to chase the device sales, thinking that they were going to buy content, and people didn't really know what to do with that, what to do with those devices after they were purchased.
Yeah, a common theme we see all the time.
No,
How about you guys?
I can say that I absolutely agree. We see that all the time, that schools, they want to go digital, so they start buying hardware, but it's not connected. I can speak, I have a lot of discussions with my mother, who's a teacher in Sweden, and everyone has iPads and there's learning management systems, etc. But no one has actually really showed her how this could help her in her work. So it's just added workload for her, which is something we see as well, and that's why we keep investing in this user experience, this platform to make, both for the teacher and the student, the journey to be tight.
One of the things we do at OWL with our portfolio is we focus on measuring and finding ways to kind of cleanly and crisply communicate product efficacy. The belief is that will be very valuable fuel for sales and marketing purposes, as well as just the right thing to do. Curious, for those of you who are actually out in the market selling to schools, are procurement decisions being made upon kind of the promise of efficacy? Is that a critical component of that conversation, or is it different?
So for Speakaboos, as I mentioned, we do a lot of formative research. We test every single story, and we have great metrics from results. Kids are reading 50 books a month. They're spending over 4 hours reading and 22 minutes reading per session. With that said, we are now conducting efficacy research. We've heard from the schools that we're trying to sell to, and through some of our third-party distribution partners, that they need that to be able to sell us. So we're just wrapping up our efficacy study, proving that we motivate kids to read, proving that we improve vocabulary acquisition, proving that we build literacy skills. So for us, it is a critical piece of the puzzle.
You probably, your market's too young to really like demand that yet, I'm guessing.
I can give you the controversial answer you wanted, though.
Well, what I want to hear is that people don't ask the question. I love knowing that that's becoming something you guys confront, but tell
So
me what you're
you asked where do you like selling to, and do people ask the question? So I most like selling to East Asia, over a quarter of household income on average going towards education. I'm a French citizen, I'll have you know, but I least like selling to Europe because people look at me like I'm an ideological criminal for suggesting that they pay for education. That's like a very, what? You charge $4,000 for 4 weeks? That's an entire year of university here. Go back, crazy American. And then I'm most excited about Africa, and my biggest unknown is Middle East and North Africa, where I have come for the first time today. To answer what they asked the question, unfortunately, I don't get asked that a lot. So we have a number of, everything from governments to large private educational organizations have been courting us in the past week to collaborate. And a lot of it has been in the ways that you traditionally imagine old school business going, so relationship building. Do I seem like the kind of guy you want to do business with? I don't know. If so, that seems to carry it somehow. And I wish that I was being, we have some really, really great stats. But I'll have companies ask me to sign an NDA, and then they won't ask me for the numbers. So I think it's maybe a sign of the wave of excitement this year around getting programming education more widely disseminated, and they can intuit because it's kind of obvious when you look at whatever alums have done that like the results seem to be good, and people that's just like good enough for folks. They get very excited and they want to push things through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
not as methodical as we'd like.
One of my observations is that with all the device deployment and adoption, there is this big adoption wave of software happening. Now, it doesn't track devices linearly or directly, but a lot of companies are showing great numbers right now due to this wave of adoption. It's our belief that over time, the efficacy data will determine who gets to stay. And there will be this kind of this receding tide where the scope of products will narrow. Matt.
That's where the research comes in too.
Yeah.
Because even if you haven't conducted a trial with randomized control groups at scale, you can at least say, we based our product design on existing research about what works.
In speaking about what works, I know it's your belief, and certainly mine, that over time the definition of what works will change, and what we're trying to achieve will change. Talk about career readiness. I mean, certainly coding has direct sort of correlation to career readiness. I know it's an investment theme of yours. Will we start seeing more of that in K12?
We'll definitely start seeing more of it in K12. Texas is kind of a pioneer there within the United States. But people at every stage of their careers, from kindergarten onwards, need to be thinking in at least a provisional way about their futures. You need to start with passion, with what the student is genuinely interested in, but then you need to connect that to possible careers. And then you need to show them what those careers are like and show them the pathways that lead them to those careers, so that instead of being a set of random tortures, those math classes are actually part of what they are trying to achieve. You need to switch them from being evaluated by the institution and ranked and numbered to using the institution for their own purposes to achieve their own goals. The problem is that students know so little about careers. So one of the things that I am most excited about that is happening within my portfolio is an advising application that's coming out in the fourth quarter that will tell a student what the precise cash value of each college course is in career terms. So if you're a computer science major, these 3 courses will add $10,000 to your salary. And I know I have a PhD in English. I taught Shakespeare for many years. I am not one of those people who thinks the liberal arts are valueless. Quite the contrary. I think they're immensely valuable when taught with integrity, although the fundamental building block of liberal arts is writing well, and there isn't a single college in the United States whose diploma does in fact guarantee that someone can write well. So that is a crucial career readiness skill. But basically, students need to be aware of the implications of their choices, and they need to be told which skills will get them decent jobs, which skill to develop next once they have those jobs, what their options really are.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some simple, very simple, heartbreaking examples, like if you're an accounting major in the US, say in the Boston area, nobody is going to tell you that taking a single course on financial derivatives will change the trajectory of your entire career. But it will, right? It makes you hireable by Fidelity or Wellington instead of by some local business.
Yeah. Agreed. I think we're seeing more and more of that, certainly where we are in Silicon Valley. We're seeing a ton of that. I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to ask you each a quick poll question, and then we're going to go to the audience for questions. And the question is, it's two parts. Is today a great time to be an entrepreneur in EdTech? And then B, are we in a bubble? Like, some people are talking about Silicon Valley being in an investment bubble. I certainly have sharp thoughts on that. I'd love to go around the room, given that you guys are building companies, and hear what you think. So let's start with you.
It's a challenging time, I would say that. Yes, there are a lot of people adopting technology, that's for sure. I think that done right, there is a true value of having this technology in the classroom. But just like the rest of the internet, how to monetize that, for some reason, years ago, that people thought that putting content on the internet should be free, modeling the broadcast model. Our founder, very early on, gave some content away free, very little, but set up a subscription. People thought he was crazy, actually. But if you have quality content out there, people are going to buy it. The challenge for most entrepreneurs right now is actually discoverability, just because there's so much content out there. BrainPop, for instance, we saw this with educational gaming. We had an audience, so what we did was we actually created a platform called Game Up. And we went and looked at some of the best games in the market and offered those to teachers for free, just to help get these games out there, and so for teachers to understand, to see the benefits of the games.
Bubble? Yes? No?
There are some things out there that are not going to be there in a few years. Let's just say that.
You're growing right now. You're just getting started. So, what are you thinking?
Seems like a great time. Seems like global awareness around my particular sector, which is programming education, is at an all-time high. So never before have there been so many government initiatives rolling out here and there. Everyone is really trying to promote this. So that's a good time. That in itself, not in the sense that you meant, for tech, but that in itself might be a bubble. I don't know. It might be that there's an over-enthusiasm around let's turn our entire country into programmers, and that actually won't bear out, and that they also need to be able to learn how to write well. But I agree with you that it's incredibly annoying that there's not a single university graduate that you can say, oh, because you have that diploma and you studied writing there, that you can write well. It frustrates me to no end when hiring. But in terms of whether there's a tech bubble, I operate in a, bubble within the bubble where I haven't seen anything really change. Parents still want a good education for their children. The interest for what I'm doing is very high.
Spending's not going down.
Spending's not going down. Good investors still talk to me. So things seem to be okay. I don't know. Maybe a unicorn is going to crash into a rainbow somewhere here and there. But I'm not worried about my part of the world, I guess.
My 2 cents, just to tack on, I'm next in line. I think it's an unbelievable time to be an EdTech entrepreneur. If you look at other sectors which seem to be going through highs and lows, let's just take the US market. The spending on education technology is not going to retreat due to the global recession that may or may not be coming. So it's almost like it's not a harbor in the storm, so to speak, but it's a very stable spending environment for entrepreneurs launching products. So if you have a differentiated product, you're in a great market. So we'll go quickly on you guys, and we'll jump to the audience.
Yeah, so I think it's a very exciting time, especially for us in the early childhood space. There's a lot of attention on the importance of early childhood education, and there's not a lot of big players in that space. So it's a very exciting time for us, specifically around literacy. And as far as the bubble is concerned, I think as long as per what Dan was saying, as long as the content is there and then those key metrics are hit, I think there will hopefully always be investors.
Business models.
Yes.
Yeah, for me personally, I'm thrilled about working within education. For us, technology is just a medium or a vehicle, right? So we build and we sell courses with the learning outcomes where the children actually need to pass an exam. Then which technology we use to deliver that doesn't mean that much to me, right? So I think there might be a bubble within some tech companies that are pre-revenue and in search of a business model. But I think just generally in education, I think we're going to see even more demand for quality education worldwide.
I completely agree.
So it's a great time to be an entrepreneur in education technology if you have a real mission, if there's a particular problem that you actually want to solve. The problem that many entrepreneurs have is that they want to be a CEO. I'm 25. Those old folk have nothing to teach me anymore. It's time for me to be a CEO. It looked cool in the social network. I want to wear a hoodie and make $1 billion. But if you don't have a particular problem in mind, if you don't have a unique capacity to solve that problem, if you're not willing to suffer a lot to realize that vision, you should not be an entrepreneur. As to whether there's a bubble or not, I personally made money in the public markets in 2000 and in 2008. I could see that there were problems. I don't know how many of you, it looks to me as if most of you in this audience probably can remember what it was like in 1999, getting stock tips from your dentist, feeling like a moron because you hadn't joined a startup and already made $50 million for 2 months of work, and taken public a company with 0 revenues and so on. This is not like that. It has actually not been that easy to take companies public. There have been some excesses related to imitations of the on-demand model of Uber, companies that lose money on every transaction. There have been some excesses at the late stage, although even there, I think people don't understand. That's preferred stock, right? They lose money only if the company is worth less than the amount of money that got invested. So it doesn't matter that Uber is valued at $62 billion. It only matters that it's worth more than $8 billion, which is how much they've raised. The rest is just upside.
Right. Here. All right, I'm sensing hands going up all over the room. Who has a question for the audience or the moderator? We'd love to involve you all. Right here.
So I know that this is a business conversation, but it seems hyper-capitalized in the sense that we're talking about education. And so when you say that you would put, that it might be a good idea to put a number or a salary number on course study, do you think that that's a dangerous proposition at some point, or do you think it's sustainable?
People are spending so much time and money getting that college education. I think that it is incredibly irresponsible for colleges not to give them better information than they currently do about the implications of the choices, the important choices they're making. Now, with that said, I think that majoring in art history can be a wonderful thing to do and also a valuable set of skills if it's done with integrity. I highly recommend the work of the Lumina Foundation on what they call the degree qualifications profile on the skills that one ought to be mastering in the course of any degree. If taught with integrity, the liberal arts are perfectly good preparation for jobs, and there are many other reasons to study things because you are passionate about them. But what is terrible is when people study something because they think it's going to get them a job, even though they find it dull, and then it doesn't get them a job.
I guess my point really is that are we just becoming educated to get jobs? Is there a
No,
sense of
no.
cultural-
We are also becoming educated to be parents, to be citizens, to be entertaining to ourselves, and to be spiritually engaged as well. All of those things are part of education. I think that without education, civilization will not fare well on any level. So we have to keep all of those things in mind. I think that actually teaching people good values and good habits teaching people persistence, teaching them self-control has substantial value in the workforce, but also substantial value in one's own life and in one's community.
And there's probably increasing distinction between a K12 foundation and a higher ed, and certainly a graduate education as the emphasis shifts. But absolutely fair question.
I did quite a lot of work in the fintech space, which is a bit further advanced, I think, in many ways than the EdTech space. But it seems to me, from the conversation this afternoon and this morning, as with fintech, we haven't really seen true transformation in the category yet. Now, I happen to believe that it will come. We heard this morning in the plenary about all the challenges that the world faces through the twin tracks that were described and so on. So it looks like we need some transformation. Where do you guys think that transformation would come? What sort of areas are you seeing people working on that? I know everything that you're doing is very good, but you know, it feels like there's still a lot of space out there for true transformation.
You want to talk about some of the work you're doing with IB? I'll hit on it first, and then I want you guys to dive in. So I think one way to address what you're asking is this are we fundamentally shifting what people learn or the way in which people learn, or are we, you know, one of the things that I would argue that's the sort of first wave of success is just transforming the medium on which we deliver education, right? So just making it massively more scalable. I mean, you're doing that quite successfully. I think that's the first wave that will be proven to be highly effective, and then others will follow.
No, I completely agree. I think we have to give it some time, and we have to have children. I mean, my oldest son was born after the iPad was launched, which means that in his world the iPad has always been there, right? Mm-hmm. So that would not be introducing anything new to him. I think we have to be a bit patient. I know that many investors have been very patient within the EdTech sector for many years. But one of the things that was never there was the user experience, that coherent, user journey, and that's happening now. So I think when we give that some time and we let students actually be successful all the way through up to the workplace, then more and more will change. So some markets will actually have to change because they have to. They don't have access to well-trained teachers, and they will have to take access from teachers from the cloud. Just to get an education of high quality. So different objectives.
I was just gonna comment that one trend that I've noticed might power a decently big change, at least in higher education, is that you now have access to a lot of information. So the notion that a higher education is the place you must go to extract, humanities built up knowledge from the library and your professors, and if you don't get it then you're screwed is a bit of a lost notion. Now you have Wikipedia and all these online courses. And so I think we're going to be able to be a little bit more thoughtful and granular around what needs to be packed in that period of time that you're investing in yourself and perhaps foregoing employment and spending your full time educating yourself, and what ought to be learned but will not necessarily have to happen in that, is really your only window, your undergraduate experience, and if you choose to, your graduate experience. Who says when you're 35 that you shouldn't be able to take a French literature course, part-time as you're employed? It doesn't make sense to go into debt to take that course when you're 19. Perhaps before there was no other way to do it, but now there are. And so I think that ability to reshuffle how you access information, the media through which you access information, will change a lot of the ways that we structure the more mandatory or formal aspects of our K12 and higher education.
Yeah, and you're hitting on the notion of transparency around outcome. If I do this, what's likely to happen to me? And I, as a responsible citizen, can make an informed judgment on what I want to do.
Right.
Hi. My question is in relation to a few of the points that was made in regards to the fact that Silicon Valley and corporations have a lot more information about the individual users than, say, school districts or government. And so I'm curious, which is happening at the same time that President Obama's in South by Southwest asking for open data. And so I'm curious, in your partnerships with governments and school districts, how do you balance providing enough information for them to be able to make informed decisions without ruining policy standards for the user?
Sure. We have open data privacy policy. We don't own the data. We conform to FERPA and COPA compliance in the United States. The data is there to help us inform decisions, but ultimately it's the school's data.
There's been a lot of agitation politically in the US around student data privacy. It seems like something of a red herring to me. I've asked people to point towards a student who was actually harmed by the disclosure of student information. I mean, it just seems so obvious that if you're really concerned about students damaging their future because of information about something they did when they were kids, you have to look to social networks. I could probably design you an algorithm myself that would figure out whether a kid had been in juvenile detention from social media, or whether a kid had diabetes. And there's a known set of algorithms for looking at student writing and figuring out their propensity for developing schizophrenia. That's all out there in public, and the idea that these longitudinal data systems in the schools are somehow going to harm students by disclosure of information about them, or that they will provide commercially valuable information that can be used to market to the students, doesn't seem like our most urgent priority compared to what's happening on social media.
Let me come to this side a little bit.
Hi, sorry.
Oh, please.
Behind you.
Yeah.
Sorry to
Oh,
make
yeah,
everyone turn
back
around.
there, yes.
I just wanted to take the conversation in a slightly different direction, if that's okay. In 2000, up until 2011, I was a head of ICT in a secondary school in the UK. I'm now a teacher trainer in the UK, and I deal very much with training students in how to use ICT in the classroom. One of the things that frustrates me about EdTech in particular is it's usually commercially driven. And so we have a program, and I'll give you an example. Microsoft produce Office. We have to buy Office because that's the industry standard. We have to teach Office. It's usually tech-led, it's usually market-led rather than education-led. I mean, how would you respond to that? And would you think about creating things in reaction to teachers' requests for tech itself?
Let me hit on this first. I know we're all passionate about this topic. The thing that, or the example I cite often to confront this is, there's two elements. One, most of the products and services we're disrupting are publisher owned. So we are cannibalizing a for-profit industry already. And so I think to the extent that procurement decisions are made upon the promise of improved student outcome, then it's a wonderful thing, or at least that's a check to the system. But it's absolutely a fair question. Anyone else?
There's a lot of bad technology out there, horrible technology.
So I was just going to pick up on this gentleman's point. I had the smartboard, which was a perfect example. How many smartboards were sold early millennium, 1990s? How many were used? And this is a waste of money.
One important criterion that I didn't talk about, it's sort of part of the category of empathy, is understanding not just what teachers and students need, but also what institutions need. What is it that will fit into the way a school district does things? What is it that will accord with the priorities of the school district as well as with the priorities of the teachers and the students? And if it doesn't match those priorities, it probably won't get used. The smartboards were particularly ridiculous because everyone knows how to use an iPad. You can connect an iPad to a large screen. Instead, you have this thing that requires 40 hours of professional development just to begin using it.
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate example.
No, I was just going to say, if you do bring the teacher into the decision-making process, there's less likely a problem for that type of problem to exist.
That's my question.
Well, here, let me just hit on that specifically. I'd say with my portfolio in particular, I'll throw out a number that's directionally accurate. About 50% of those companies sell by leveraging in the school teacher advocate. So some teacher has discovered the product on their own through some miracle, fallen in love with it, used it, and then has walked down the hall with the principal or has motivated a group of teachers to advocate for the school to upgrade. So it's sort of authentic demand-driven procurement. And I think that's a very, very big change in distribution strategy that's starting to take hold in schools today. And it's
There's so much EdTech available that as an educator, I don't know which is the one that suits my requirement.
right. Huge problem.
If I can comment on that, when we build our courses, we build them together with teachers. We have 150 teachers now that are delivering our courses within the IB, and the course design has to come first, not the technology, right? So like I said earlier, it's all about what can deliver the best outcomes most efficiently. And then the way we build our platform is that we use, APIs, which might be a very technical word, but we try to be able to work with many different providers and use what serves our course the best.
So
if
it's
you
all
lead with
about the
that-
outcome, not the technology.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, it has to be like that. Well, so our students go through the International Baccalaureate exam. We get grades on everyone. So it's very black and white. If we do badly, we have no business, and fortunately, we do pretty well. But so all the thousands of students that go through us, they have an exam at the end of their second year.
But not everyone has that, right? Blackboard, how do you know? But here's the thing, Blackboard is different from Word. Blackboard, no one forced you to buy Blackboard. That was just, or a smartboard. That was just like a mistake, right? Word is external market circumstances that force it to be popular.
They're two different cases, but they're very similar kind of market-driven examples because education almost has to follow the market.
But the market maybe is working because now that everyone learned that smartboards were a bad idea, they won't sell anymore. And perhaps people had to suffer for that to happen, but over time, with thousands of schools experimenting with thousands of solutions, it will surface the best practices and the best ones, and we all now know not to buy smartboards. So that's good news.
All right, let's do one or two more.
Yeah, I've got a like the panel to comment. Last year, Cornelius and Sancho produced findings to say that ICT had failed to make changes to pedagogy or enhance learning outcomes. We heard Andres in one of his papers that was produced last year talking about that ICT's negative effects on learning outcomes. And then we have the rise of the Waldorf schools globally, in which they do not have a high dependency on ICT. I'm a headmaster from a primary school in Africa. I'd like to thank you very much for choosing Africa, because I believe there's a great market there. And I'd just like the panel to comment on those findings and those researchers. And I had a chat to Andres earlier today, and we came up with the fact that ICT is here to stay, but are we using it the best way to enhance learning outcomes, or do you, the guys from Silicon Valley, need to rethink your programs and come up with systems and apps and whatever to actually do what it's meant to do, enhance learning outcomes, because the current research that's coming out doesn't seem to support that.
That's research on older technology. There's a lot of bad technology out there for sure, but that doesn't mean that we don't have investments in companies or work for companies that have strong demonstrated efficacy.
I will say that we use blackboards, or just normal whiteboards still to teach programming sometimes. So we're cutting edge new curriculum content, but then sometimes the best way to deliver is to sit up there and collaboratively write on a whiteboard. So I really sympathize with that sentiment, but it's absolutely true. There's a lot of, I wouldn't lump everything in the same category, because there's some really wonderful stuff out there. And again, with thousands of schools experimenting with thousands of different solutions, I think we're starting to surface some better content, and that research perhaps is losing touch of that fact.
You've had your arm up for a moment, yeah.
So if I could just, I have a principal's voice. So I'm a principal in New York City. I opened a school 6 years ago. We're a STEAM-focused school. And I'm in one of the poorest neighborhoods that's known throughout the United States and beyond. And here's what I find. The tech industry is like the pharmaceutical companies. They come with their bags, they come with a lot of folders, they tell me all the great things that I want to hear. There's a lot of pressure that comes from the Department of Education about the things that we should have that will make your school look progressive in order for you to look like you are providing a world-class education. So I've bought into a lot of products that at the end of the day, when you try to get somebody on the phone to provide tech support, you can't get that person there. Or I have to now pay for professional development after I've paid thousands of dollars, so there's no investment in the success of my scholars in my building. So with BrainPop, because I've wasted so much money, I could not afford to use BrainPop. And I want my kids to have a world-class education. I want them to be globally competitive. But are so low, and I have a 32% special ed population,
Wow.
that software like BrainPop moves my kids. So the founder, after speaking at Harvard, offered the opportunity of giving us the license for free, but I said, I want a partnership. So he had a team come to the school that actually works with my scholars and actually works with my teachers to find out what's working and what's not working, and what do we need more of, because we have a different population from other schools. But in addition to that, the person who was working with that team, one of the young ladies' name was Enid. She actually did coding with my kids. So now we talk about college and career readiness and actually introducing kids to something else other than just looking at BrainPop. And all of my kids in 7th grade have to take an entrepreneurship class because of the high poverty rate. I want them to be able to be competitive. So overall, and I want to say to those who create these products, you have to see it that it's not just a product, it becomes a service. And you also have to build relationship with schools, because for me, if you're invested in being part of my school and being part of the success of my kids, then all of this data that we talk about that is supposed to be objective becomes subjective, because it's what you want to see and how you want to create the narrative, can actually see the long-term results of the success of children.
Well said.
Is that a good one to close on?
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.